There we
Okay.
go. You're good. You're good. So how many of you here tonight are members of the Friends of the Wissahickon? Yes, wonderful. Yay for members. If you're not a member, you might want to consider joining our group. We are going to be 100 next year. We're looking great. We have a wonderful program of events planned for our 100th anniversary. You'd be joining a great group of over 3,000 members and also then donors and foundations and community groups. We have a wide base of support that we're really proud of. We're official park partner of Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, helping to make more things possible in the Wissahickon. Better stewardship, more programming, care of our historic assets. Excellent. Please, speaker. Thank you. So if you're a member, you know a lot of what we do. We're working 365 days a year, it feels like. We have volunteer days almost every day of the week. I said today, more days of the week than not, you can volunteer with the Friends of the Wissahickon. So if there's something you're interested in, it's likely we need you to come help us with it, and we hope you'll check us out. We offer great programming for kids through our Little Friends program and a whole host of stewardship, both in the park and education about our watershed and ways everyone can come together to get involved to keep this cleaner, greener, and more enjoyable for all of us. And really then take our work from here in the Wissahickon and make a bigger impact in the community. So that's what we're doing. Good. Yes. So I hope you agree. You should be friends with us. And there's so many ways to get involved. Just spreading the word, even sharing your stories of the Wissahickon with us, with your friends. We'd love to hear it all. Thank you, Jordan. And I'd also like to thank our wonderful sponsor tonight, made possible by our wonderful board member, Ethan Burchard, and the company that he is involved with, Prentice Smith. Prentice Smith has provided performance-driven, environmentally and socially responsible investments since 1982. They believe that rewarding positive environmental and social change with investment capital can amplify that change. And that's something we feel really good about having behind us and making possible these talks. So with that, I'm going to thank Ethan, turn it over to him to say a few words about our speaker, and then we'll get going.
Thanks, Raffian. Hi, Jordan. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna try to get this mic. So one of these is for the web, and one of these is for you. And I forget which one it is. Which one is good? Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight, and for those of us who are with us online. I'm excited to be able to welcome our guest speaker for the night, who is Jordan Sanford with the PA Game Commission. Jordan is a wildlife outreach coordinator with the State Wildlife Agency. She focuses on engaging and communicating with non-traditional audiences in the state about who the Pennsylvania Game Commission is and why the work they do is important for wildlife and for people. Prior to this role, Jordan was an education intern based out of the Game Commission's Southeast region for 2 years. And outside of work, Jordan enjoys going to concerts with friends, reading, being outside, and hanging out with her cat, Olive. I like all those things too, but I don't know why. Anyway, we're really happy to have you, and I'm excited for the program. Thanks,
Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. So my talk today is called A Bird's Eye View of Watching Wildlife in Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit about myself, give you guys some background on the Game Commission, in case if you haven't heard of us before, talk about what wildlife viewing is, give you some tips and tricks to be a safe and ethical wildlife viewer, where you can go in Pennsylvania to view some wildlife, different resources that are really helpful, and then taking questions both in person and online. So this is just a little bit about me. Like Ethan had mentioned, I previously worked with the Game Commission for 2 years as an education intern out of our Southeast region office. I graduated college in May of 2020 and started in June of 2020 right away with the Game Commission. during that time, we were in the midst of a pandemic, so there wasn't a lot of education really going on. Kids weren't in school. We weren't able to go into places and do programs. But because of that, I had the really awesome opportunity to do a lot of the biological and habitat work that our agency does. So I got to experience a lot of different facets of our agency that I normally wouldn't have had. And then my second year of my internship, I was able to put everything that I learned doing, actually hands-on doing the stuff, to then teach to people about it, both children and adults, which that's really my passion, is being able to talk about all the really neat stuff that our agency does and how it's valuable, not only for wildlife, but for people as well. So yeah, just on the left here, we have a picture of me with a bear cub. I love that picture, and I think a lot of people also like that picture. But we have a ton of black bears in Pennsylvania, and we do a lot of research on them as it relates to their movement, as they move and interact with humans. So this was a chance I got to go check out a bear den in Northeast Pennsylvania. So that was really cool. One of the middle pictures is me with a turkey. Much like the bears, we also do a lot of research on turkeys. We mainly do research with male turkeys. The young males are called jakes, and the adults are called gobblers. The middle, but to the right, is me with, does anybody know what type of bird that is? It's an owl. Does anybody know? It's a screech owl, actually. So this is a screech owl in the red phase. So this is our second smallest owl in Pennsylvania. And I was actually saw with owl banding. So the eastern screech was not our target species, but we still banded him because he was still an owl, and it was really cool. And then the right-hand picture is me teaching a fur bear program up at Hawk Mountain. So that was the second year of my internship, getting a chance to interact with all of their summer campers. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Has anybody here heard of the Game Commission before? Yeah, good. That's what we like to see. So what are those of you that know us, or maybe don't know us but have a guess, what would you say is our mission, or what is it that we do as the Game Commission? Does anybody know? Conserve wildlife, right? Anything else you can think of?
Stop people from hunting off season.
Ah, yeah, stop people from hunting off season. So that's basically the gist of it. But in the pretty terms, our mission is we manage and protect wildlife in their habitats while promoting hunting and trapping for current and future generations. So something unique about Pennsylvania is most states have one natural resource agency, and they have divisions for wildlife, for fisheries, for forest. Pennsylvania is unique in that we have 3 separate agencies. So the Pennsylvania Game Commission is in charge of wild birds, wild mammals, hunting and trapping. Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission is in charge of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and recreational fishing and boating. And then Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, or DCNR, they're in charge of state parks and state forests. So a lot of the more also outdoor recreation, like hiking, biking, things like that. So today we're just going to be talking about birds, mammals, hunting, and trapping. And that's what the Game Commission does. This one here is just like a quick snapshot of our agency. So in Pennsylvania, there's about, give or take, 13 million people, and we have just close to 1 million hunters. So Pennsylvania is number 2 or 3 in the nation for numbers of hunters in our state. So that's pretty awesome. We have over 1.5 million acres of public state game lands, where the primary purpose of those lands are for hunting or trapping, but secondary uses such as hiking, biking, horseback riding is also allowed, where denoted by our signage. We have 26 game mammals and 51 game birds, game meaning that they are huntable species. We have 480 species of birds and mammals in our state. And we have 309 state game lands in 65 counties, but I'm happy to report this is actually 310 in 66 counties, because we just recently acquired a new game lands right here in Philadelphia County, which is exciting. So we acquired an 18-acre parcel of land near Benjamin Rush State Park. So they're still working out the logistics of that, but really happy to say that we now have public land in Philadelphia. So next we're going to get into a little bit about what wildlife viewing is. So wildlife viewing is defined as intentionally observing, feeding, or photographing wildlife, or visiting maintained natural areas because of wildlife. So wildlife viewing is actually one of the most popular and fastest growing forms of outdoor recreation, both in Pennsylvania and in the United States. So there's a survey that goes out, I think, once every 5 or 10 years. And it's the National Survey of Fishing, Hunting, and Wildlife Associated Recreation. So 2022 is the most recent study, and they reported 57% of the US population 16 years or older count themselves as wildlife viewers. So that's really, really cool. People are kind of finding their connections to nature and to wildlife. And we think that's really awesome as a state wildlife agency. But with that, there's a lot of things to kind of consider. Wildlife is wild for a reason. They aren't pets. They shouldn't be named, things like that. So I just wanted to share some of our favorite tips with you guys. If you're interested in going out and viewing wildlife, there's some important things to know and to remember. So first thing, know before you go. So this is just really important to kind of check out website or get a map or know the lay of the land. As a hunting state, we do have hunting on some public properties like our game lands. Several state parks do allow hunting. So you just want to be aware of that. And you want to wear, like, if there's proper orange to be worn, you want to make yourself seen. Or if you're hiking somewhere, you want to make sure that you're allowed to be able to do that. You don't want to get in trouble for something just by a misunderstanding. So just doing a little bit of research before you go is always important, both for your safety and for the well-being or the knowledge of the agency or property that you're on. Be respectful of other visitors. So during peak wildlife viewing seasons, like for example, we do have elk in Pennsylvania. They're all in the north central part of the state. And it's really a spectacle. A lot of people travel or go up to the north central part of the state during the time of the elk rut, which is their breeding season. They're bugling, they're really active, and elk are some pretty charismatic megafauna. But with that, there's a lot of people. So you have to be respectful of other visitors. The best times to see wildlife sometimes are dawn and dusk. So you might anticipate running into some other folks trying to do the same thing you're doing. So always remember to just be respectful. With this, it's always respectful to view from a distance. So our general rule of thumb is view wildlife from 100 yards away, especially those bigger megafaunas like elk, like bear, like deer. That's both for the safety of the animal and for yourself. So using things like binoculars or spotting scope, those are really important to help, like I said, keep you and the wildlife you're viewing safe. So always view from a distance. Also, it's important to not disturb wildlife, especially during nesting or breeding season. When wildlife have young wildlife with them, they can be pretty unpredictable, and they can become protective. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's best to just not disturb wildlife when there's young or during the nesting and breeding seasons. Another one, by feeding wildlife, you can increase risks to your own safety, risks to wildlife safety. You can help spread disease that way, which is never good. And then it also takes a bit away from their wild nature. If they're willing to come up to you, if you feed them, that means they're also willing to come up to other people. And that's not what we're in the business of. We're in the business of keeping wildlife wild. So it's always important to never feed wildlife. This one, I think it is good just in your everyday life. If you bring something in, bring it out. If you see a wrapper on the ground, be a good person, pick it up, take it to a trash can. That one's a little self-explanatory, but with the pandemic, we've seen a rise, a great increase in people visiting natural spaces more, which, as cool as that is, there's also a rise in trash or litter, things like that. So just always be aware of that. Make sure anything that you're bringing in, you bring it out with you. And then also along those lines, if you see something, say something. So the Game Commission recently went from having different dispatch centers to one centralized dispatch. So if you're out on the game lands or anywhere and you see an injured or sick animal, a deer that's walking around and he's got a broken leg, or you see a baby beaver, but you don't see its mom anywhere, it's always good to give us a call. We have law enforcement officers called state game wardens. And when you call our central dispatch office, dispatch will connect a game warden to the case and they'll be able to come out and help. That was one thing I wanted to say before too. The Game Commission has a lot of different careers in our agency. So state game warden, they are our law enforcement officers, and they are responsible for enforcing hunting laws, helping to manage wildlife. They're like our boots on the ground kind of guys and gals. We also have education staff. We have marketing and outreach staff. Land management and forestry is a really big part of our agency. And then also wildlife management, our biologists and our wildlife technicians. So if some people are familiar with our agency, sometimes it's just with that law enforcement sense, but there's a way more to our agency than just our law enforcement. So this is where I kind of wanted to get into different places that you can go in Pennsylvania to view some wildlife. So our agency and most of our other sister agencies like Fish and Boat and DCNR, we divide the state into 6 regions. So starting off, we have our Northwest region, and the state game lands I wanted to focus on here was Pymatuning. So Pymatuning State Park has a huge reservoir, and we kind of jointly manage this area with DCNR and then also the Wildlife Agency in Ohio, because Pymatuning stretches both into Ohio and Pennsylvania. But this game lands is really cool. It was originally managed back in the day for waterfowl. So it's got some really high quality waterfowl habitat up there. It's also designated as an important bird area by the Audubon Society because of its quality habitat. It's really good not only for waterfowl, but over 200 species of songbirds, all different kinds of raptors, water birds like herons and egrets. So Pymatuning is a really cool place to go check out. Next, in our Southwest region, we have State Game Lands 51. And this is a large game lands at 17,000 acres. This game lands has a lot of public parking areas and a lot of administrative roads, which make really good hiking paths for people. This game lands is mainly forested, and it has some mixed hardwoods. And one of the management goals here at State Game Lands 51 is to maintain early successional habitat. So Pennsylvania historically is a very forested place. And while it looks really beautiful, especially this time of year when all of our leaves are changing, sometimes that isn't the best quality habitat. While these trees are really tall and really old, there's nothing on the ground level to eat, like for deer, bear, foxes, coyotes. But then on the other side of the spectrum, if it's all flat and just a grassland, there isn't really much there either, right? There's no trees for birds to nest in or turkeys to roost in. So what the best kind of habitat that impacts the most amount of species and the highest quality habitat is what we call early successional. And that is a mix between those grasslands, some shrubbies, young trees, as well as the really tall old forest. So State Game Lands 51 is a really prime example of this early successional habitat. And we have a lot of white-tailed deer, turkeys, bears, and then we also have some really unique species that are so finicky for their habitat. They need to have really specific habitats, and they're found here at this game land. So ruffed grouse, which is our state bird, golden wing warblers, and brown thrashers. And there's also a lot of species of greatest conservation need found at this game lands. And those are species that, we're really trying to manage to help them, because whether it's loss of habitat or population decreases, these species are what we really want to focus on. So things like the Acadian flycatcher, wood thrush, winter wren, Louisiana water thrush, and Kentucky warblers. So those are all bird species, but still really important, and they can all be found at this game lands. Another one that hopefully some of you have heard of, but I mentioned a little bit earlier in the talk, is State Game Lands 311 or Elk Range. This is a really popular game lands because it is where our elk herd lives. So we have about 1,800 elk, and they live all in this radius of the Elk Range, but it's those 4 counties right around there where the orange dot is, that's considered our Elk Range. We have that game land specifically is 3,800 acres, And our elk herd is the largest free roaming elk herd in the eastern United States, which is really cool. Back when the Game Commission was founded in 1895, elk had actually been extirpated from the state. So they were no longer found here. And one of the first things that the Game Commission did was reintroduce elk from the Rocky Mountains. So we actually loaded elk up into train cars and shipped them over here to Pennsylvania. And we had a small herd that we thought was doing okay. So we opened up a hunting season, completely decimated them. So then we got some more elk, and slowly but surely through the years, through really active wildlife management and habitat management, we now have a really healthy elk herd. We do offer a hunting season on elk. Both we have an early season, a general season, and a late season, but we do offer as a lottery. So unlike white-tailed deer in Pennsylvania, where you can just go get your license and have an opportunity to hunt a deer, in elk, you have to enter a lottery system. So you pay for a chance to try to hunt an elk. It's really popular. Like I said, we have the largest free roaming elk herd in the eastern United States. So we have a lot of people from other states coming in, both to see the elk and to try their hand at hunting the elk. But it's really a really cool thing, especially this time of year when the elk are in the rut. The male elk, called bulls, are bugling to try to court the female elk. And it's just a really, really special thing. And that area of Pennsylvania is really neat to see in the fall as well. So if you haven't gotten a chance, the town there that the elk herd is mainly around is called Benezet. And it's really cute. And we have a large Game Commission presence there. We have a lot of signage. We're always doing outreach. So if you're looking to take a day trip or a long weekend, definitely check out the elk range in the north central part of our state. So next, here in the south central region, we have State Game Lands 230 and also Wagner's Gap Hawk Watch. So this is recently acquired by the Game Commission within the last year or so. State Game Lands 230 already existed for quite some time, but Wagner's Gap Hawk Watch is what we recently acquired from Audubon. So this is a monumentous kind of deal because Wagner's Gap Hawk Watch is one of, I think it is the first game lands acquired where there is no hunting allowed on this game lands because it's strictly for the conservation and management of raptors. So Wagner's Gap is situated along the Kittatinny Ridge, which is part of the Appalachian Mountains, and it's a migration highway is what they call it. So all kinds of songbirds and raptors or birds of prey will migrate in the fall along the Kittatinny Ridge. And Wagner's Gap Hawk Watch is a rocky outcropping in the south central region where you can go up and you can see tons of different raptors, whether it be October is really good time for red-tailed hawks, golden eagles. Wagner's Gap is the second longest running hawk watch in Pennsylvania behind Hawk Mountain. They're number one. But Wagner's Gap is most known for golden eagles. So golden eagles, just kind of imagine a bald eagle, but bigger than a bald eagle. And they're all brown. They don't have the white head or the white tail. And they have a yellow eyeball. So Wagner's Gap is really cool. It's right off the Appalachian Trail. If any of you are hikers, we have the Wagner's Gap sits right on the Appalachian Trail. And then also the Tuscarora Trail shoots off right near Wagner's Gap. And we're really excited with this being a non-huntable section of that game lands. Opportunity is ripe for outreach. So I was so happy to have the chance to go up there this September and do an outreach program. And it's a really cool thing to be with other birders and wildlife watchers and checking out these different birds of prey. And our counter up there, who actually sits there and counts how many raptors come each day, and which species and how many, they'll tell you all about different wind patterns and based on time of day and wind direction. They're very, very smart and they know so many cool facts. So again, this is a really cool game list to check out. Moving over to our Northeast region, State Game Lands 180 or Shohola Falls. This is a big game lands, about 12,500 acres, and it's in Pike County. So this one's really cool because we have swamps, peat bogs, and wetlands, and we have a really large waterfowl impoundment as well, about 900 acres lake, a 900-acre lake at Shohola Falls. Another really cool thing is, as the name suggests, there's a really beautiful waterfall. It's kind of kind of a gorge situation. So there's some really cool waterfalls up at Shohola Falls. And of course, this was managed a long time ago, but still today for waterfowl. So there is a lot of really cool ducks that you can see up at Shohola Falls. And there's also a lot of hiking trails. So there's a lot of different kinds of outdoor recreation that can happen at Shohola Falls. And then possibly the one that's kind of close to here, but a little bit of a drive in the southeast region is Gamelands 46 or Middle Creek Wildlife Management Area. So I might be a little biased because this is where I worked for the last 2 years, but Middle Creek is one of the coolest places that we, as the Game Commission, own and operate. So Middle Creek is a 6,000 acre wildlife management area. We have a 400 acre impoundment. And it's also the location of the only owned and operated visitor center that the Game Commission owns. So it's really a unique kind of melting pot of a game lands. We offer special hunting opportunities. We offer outdoor recreation like hiking, biking, non-motorized boating. A lot of land management practices happen there, like prescribed fire. We do a lot of biological work. So we banned songbirds, kestrels, turkeys, ducks, barn owls we banned there. And then we actually just recently added to our visitor center, we added a conservation history museum. So it has the whole history of the Game Commission since we were founded in 1895. And we have a lot of really cool artifacts from over the years to show kind of how wildlife and habitat management and conservation has changed over the last 200 or so years. So Middle Creek is super cool. It's on the border of Lebanon and Lancaster counties. So that one's worth a day trip too. So now we're looking a little closer to home here in Philadelphia. I'm sure most of you will have heard some of the places I'm mentioning. But we've got Wissahickon Valley Park. It's located in the northwest part of the city, an 1,800 acre park, over 50 miles of trails for hiking, biking, a lot of wildlife, a lot of really cool scenery. But this is my first time here and it's absolutely beautiful. So I'm excited to come back when I don't have to work and actually enjoy my personal time checking out the place. So yeah. And then we also have Fairmount Park, which is one of, surprisingly, this is news to me, I didn't know this before, but one of the largest urban parks in the country, covering 2,000 acres. So this park is home to a lot of wildlife as well, including white-tailed deer, foxes, and a wide variety of birds. And something else I wanted to mention, I was having a talk earlier, and we were discussing coyotes. So something that most people don't know, we have coyotes in all 67 counties of Pennsylvania, even here in Philadelphia. So that was something, I don't know if they're at Fairmount or Wissahickon, but we have them. So the next one, John Hines National Wildlife Refuge. So this is owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So this is a federal property. And my friend Haley, who's here with me today, she works for the Game Commission as well. But her position is really cool because the Game Commission has a partnership with John Hines, and that we have Haley works both for us and for them. So they operate a lot of the same ways that the Game Commission does, you know, conservation, habitat management, wildlife management. But something that's really cool too is they offer in conjunction with the deer hunt there at John Hines. So that's a really neat opportunity for some more urban folks to have a chance at hunting in an area that maybe they wouldn't have a chance elsewhere or otherwise. John Hines is really cool too, a lot of really neat birds. And they also offer binoculars and fishing poles for rent. So there's a lot of ways to recreate outdoors at John Hines as well. And then we also have Pennypack Park in the northeast part of Philadelphia. And they named after the Lenape Indian word for slow moving water. Pennypack stretches 9 miles and it follows the Pennypack Creek. It covers more than 1,600 acres of woodlands, meadows, wetlands, and fields. And this park also has a lot of trails and unpaved roads, which are really good for hiking and biking. So now that we've talked a little bit about places you can go, both far away from home and closer to home, I wanted to talk about some of the wildlife viewing resources that you might find valuable. So wildlife viewing and observing wildlife can be really fun, but there's some things you need to know that will help enhance your journeys. So one would be online resources. So if you have a smartphone, you already have a bunch of resources in your hand. So online resources like Cornell Lab of Ornithology or macroinvertebrates.org are really, really good resources to help if you're on a walk and you find something you don't know what it might be, you can quick look it up on your cell phone. The left-hand picture here is our second resource, and those are printable or like printed in your hand field guides. So as you can see, this is my collection of field guides at my office. There are some people who, especially for birders, these are like their holy grail. Field guides are really important when you're out in the field. We have some of the big ones, more popular or common ones would be the Sibley Field Guide to Birds. We have the National Geographic Field Guide to Birds, Peterson Field Guide to Birds, and Audubon also makes a lot of their own field guides. But there's field guides out there for a lot of different things, not just birds. So as you can see, I have mammal tracks and sign, a field guide to hawks, field guide to mammals. They have field guides to trees, mushrooms, all different things. So sometimes it's really nice to have that resource right in your hand with pictures and descriptions. So I prefer a hands-on field guide rather than some of these online resources. Another thing though, again, a lot of us have cell phones. So the right-hand side are a couple apps that I like to use when I'm out in the field that sometimes in a pinch, if I don't have my field guide with me, these work just as well. So the one at the top is Merlin, and that's by Cornell, all about birds, the Lab of Ornithology. That's really cool. My favorite feature on that to help ID birds is they have a sound feature. So you can press record and it just starts listening and it'll tell you if a bird is calling, it'll pick up what that bird is. And that's something that I find really helpful because I'm a type of person, I have to sit there, see the bird, look at it, then try to flip through my field guide to try to find it. Sometimes the bird will get up and fly away. And it's just not that, it doesn't happen that quick. So it's really nice if I can listen to what that bird is and then go back and look at it later and then put the sound to the face, so to speak. The middle one here is Seek. I use that every day. Whenever I'm going for a walk outside of my office or I'm on a big hike, Seek is really awesome. That lets you take a picture and it IDs whatever it is, bird, mammal, plant, tree, fungus. So what's really cool is it'll go down the taxonomic order. So sometimes it'll just give you an order of the species, or if you get a really close picture or you can move in and out, it'll get you right down to the species name, which is really nice. So I've used Seek many a times. And then iTrack Wildlife is really good. If you're walking along and you see a paw print or a track and you're like, wow, what made that kind of track? I don't know what that is. iTrack Wildlife is good because it helps you figure out tracks of animals. And then right in the center there, I have a pair of binoculars. So as I mentioned before, one of our tips is making sure to keep your distance. And so having a good pair of binoculars is essential to viewing wildlife. Not to say that you can't watch wildlife like in your backyard at your bird feeder, but to really enhance your experience and have a really quality experience, a good pair of binoculars or a spotting scope will help you go a long way. So basically, in conclusion, wildlife viewers contribute to habitat and wildlife conservation financially, politically, and through participation in nature-based activities. So wildlife viewers have a direct impact on wildlife conservation and habitat conservation. Pennsylvania is rich with wildlife viewing opportunities, and it's important to remember to be safe and responsible while you're doing it. But yeah, with that being said, I thank you for listening to me. And I hope you're just as excited about wildlife as I am. And I'm happy to take any questions anybody has.
First, I think we should say thanks, Jordan. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
I'm thrilled to know that there's game land now in Philadelphia. Yeah. It's an amazing win, I think, for open space conservation.
Yeah.
And education.
Yeah, and 18 acres is a pretty big feat for
a big chunk in the city to get preserved.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Wonderful news. I don't know that I have any Zoom questions. I'm looking here on my sheet. So do we have any questions from the audience?
I have a question.
Yes.
You were talking about going on site to view, is it view.org? How do you put in your?
Oh, for like the game lands to places to view, or
No, when you were saying, oh, you find something, you put it in view and it tells you what it is.
the app was Seek.
Oh, Seek.
Seek. Yep.
So is it seek.org?
If you just go like on your, it's on your app, your phone,
Go
it's an
to
app.
The App Store, if you're iOS, the App Store, and
Yep.
Google, or Android, the Google Store. I'm sure you
Yep.
can find it.
Yeah.
Are deer and elk related?
Yes. Yeah.
And why are people hunting elk? Are they hunting them for food or are they just hunting them for sport?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So they asked if deer and elk are related, which yes, they are. They are part of the cervid family, which means hooved animals. So deer, elk, reindeer, they're all related. And for as far as why people hunt elk or just hunt anything in general, there's a lot of different motivations for hunting. So Pennsylvania has a really rich history and heritage of hunting. So sometimes people hunt just to kind of keep up with that tradition. My grandpa hunted, my great grandpa hunted. That's what we've always done, and I'm going to keep that tradition going for me and my family and my kids after that. People hunt for sustenance, so they really like to hunt for their own food, to know where that's coming from, to know that they had a role to take it from field to fork. They know what they're putting in their body completely just from the wild. It's their own thing. Another thing, the reason why I hunt, so I grew up hunting with my dad, but as I got older, busy with sports and school, I kind of got away from it. And when I started this job, I really understood how hunting is a wildlife management tool. So there's this thing called carrying capacity, and that is how many of one species can an area support without reaching, like depending on food, habitat, water, things like that. How many animals can that one area support before it kind of like plateaus and hits that max? So for deer, Pennsylvania, I would say, is over carrying capacity for deer. We have way, way, way too many white-tailed deer. So I like to do my part in conservation by hunting white-tailed deer to help keep those numbers in check, to help decrease the potential for spreading sickness, starvation. If there's not enough food for deer, I really don't like seeing that when an animal is just not doing well. So I hunt as a wildlife management and conservation tool. But it's different for everyone. There's a lot of different motivations. Some people just want to have bragging rights that they went out and they shot a trophy buck, the biggest in the record book. Some people like to do it with friends and family as kind of like a camaraderie, a fun pastime to do with friends and family. So motivations are different for everybody.
I was just going to talk about the elk, and so it's part of the reason with the lottery to kind of control,
right?
So that to keep the herd at the number you want for that area.
Right. So part of the reason why you can hunt, like I said, there is so many white-tailed deer. So you can pretty much hunt. You have to get all the right tags and things like that, but you can hunt a lot of white-tailed deer. Elk, it's a little bit of a different story because their population is relatively small. Hunting is a highly regulated wildlife management strategy. So for elk, because they're a smaller population, we don't want what happened in 1800s and 1900s where we just didn't have any laws on hunting and they decimated the elk population. We don't want that. So because they're a smaller population, we have a little bit tighter restrictions on how many tags we give out each year. So I think our elk herd sits right around 18 or 1900 elk, and we give around 130 tags each year so that we're not coming close to decimating their population.
Question in the front?
Yeah.
I know you're both excited about the Benjamin Rush part. Can you describe what bird is? And then the second question, totally separate, is are there any issues for the hunters, which I'm not, or with deer and elk with like COVID and screw?
Sure.
So I'm just going to repeat the questions so that our folks on Zoom can hear them. So the first one was locating the new game lands, which is near the state park that exists in Philadelphia, Benjamin Rush. And then following that, we'll talk a little bit about the animal transfer of COVID to
Yeah.
the deer population.
Is there anything through without?
Yeah. So for the new game lands, I'll admit I am just excited to know that we have one. As far as like the logistics of exactly where the property lines are or where it is at, all I know is that I think it's across the street from Benjamin Rush State Park. It's about 18 acres. Obviously the only hunting, or I don't, maybe it's not obvious, but the only hunting that's allowed in Philadelphia is archery hunting. So there wouldn't be any firearm hunting at that game lands. As far as I think they're still kind of working out the logistics of what that looks like and getting it into our state game land system. Something that you noticed when I was talking about all of our game lands have a number associated with them, like game lands 51 or state game lands 311. So they have to assign that game lands a number and all of that. But if you keep a track on our social media pages or our website, I'm sure that information will be forthcoming soon. Also at the back table, I have a little card for those of you interested in either our social media or our website. You can stay connected with us that way. And then as far as COVID with deer and elk and things like that, as far as I'm aware, there have not been any positive showings or studies that link deer and elk of spreading COVID in Pennsylvania. The one thing that the disease that is most prevalent with deer and elk, well, with deer in Pennsylvania, is chronic wasting disease, or CWD. So one thing that we have that it mainly, I say deer and elk because both deer and elk can get it, but currently as we are here today, only the deer in Pennsylvania have it. CWD has not transferred over to our elk populations yet, which is good. But chronic wasting disease is a protein in the deer's brain kind of mutates a little bit, and they become really, really sick. It's a fatal disease, and it's long lasting. So if you look at a deer, you can't tell that it's infected with CWD until the very end stages of the disease. It really affects their brain, and to the point where, you know, they're not eating, they're not sleeping, they are not functioning the way that normal deer will be. So deer with CWD will be very, very skinny, just not looking right at all. And so in Pennsylvania, we have special designated areas called DMAs, or disease management areas. And those are areas that we've identified, whether we find a positive CWD in the wild or, a CWD positive at a deer farm, it automatically, we put a 10-mile radius around where that positive is found, and that becomes a DMA. So a disease management area is different than a regular state game lands, because when you harvest your deer in a DMA, you're not allowed to take any of the high-risk parts out. So CWD is spread from deer to deer through bodily fluids, saliva, things like that. So high-risk parts, meaning eyes, spleen, the nervous system, like the spine. If you take that out of the disease management area and leave it, those prions that cause CWD continue to live within those high-risk parts. So the thought process is, by leaving the high-risk parts within the disease management area, the disease management area will stay small. It won't continue to spread. Also, if you harvest the deer in a disease management area, you have to take it to an approved butcher that's within that DMA as well, because a lot of people will maybe head up north, their hunting camp is up north, but they might live down here in Southeast Pennsylvania. It doesn't matter. You still have to take your deer and have it processed within that disease management area. Also, we sell DMA tags. So your normal hunting license, it will come with an antlered tag, so you can get a buck. But in disease management areas, we sell DMA tags, and you can buy as many of those as you want. And the thought again is, species or too many animals of one species in an area, that increases the risk of spread of CWD. So by trying to give out a lot of DMA tags, we're trying to keep that population in check, lower it as much as possible to then help minimize the spread of CWD. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Does that mean that people can eat them?
So then we have a question about whether you can eat an animal that has had this disease.
Right. So Game Commission doesn't recommend that.
Or from the area. I guess you probably wouldn't, it wouldn't be an attractive deer
Right.
if it was visibly wasted.
Right. So if you visibly see a deer that has CWD, do like me personally as a hunter, ethically, I would shoot that deer to take it to put it out of its misery. And then also not spread the disease, risk of spreading the disease to other animals. But one thing you can do, a lot of hunters will do, is we have CWD testing bins placed all over the state. So say you're successful, you harvest a deer, but you're concerned about if this has CWD or if it doesn't, am I going to eat it? So what you can do, we test for CWD by taking 2 of the lymph nodes near the base of the skull. Those can be removed and sent off to the lab to be tested to see if the deer is positive or not. So if you drop your head in a head bin, you get those results in about a week or 2, and you can know if your deer is positive or not. Like we said, right now, we haven't, I don't think there have been any studies or anything that show, like I said, that CWD stays in the nervous system. And when you're eating a deer meat, it's mostly muscle mass. So there's no, like, it has not been shown that CWD is in the meat, which you would be eating. So you would be safe, but that's a choice that every hunter makes for themselves as whether they choose to eat it or not.
Which county does not have a game?
Which county does not have a game limit?
Yeah, that, I'm pretty sure, that's a good question. I would
Are
think,
we getting ready for Quizzo?
yeah, I would think, oh, my friend Haley knows. Delaware County.
Because you mentioned one county.
Right. So it went from 65, which it was Delaware and Philadelphia, and now that we're having our game lands in Philadelphia, then it would be Delaware. Good. I was going to say Allegheny County, thinking Pittsburgh, but I forget they have a really large game lands out that way. They have a shooting range out there that is the largest range on the East Coast, which is really cool. So,
Ethan.
I have 2 questions. One is just whether, I'm just curious if you have research, and especially with the health, whether there's a lottery on how many people do eat their game versus not eating their game.
yeah.
The other question is totally different. I just became a dog owner, and I'm curious, I don't know if you regulate the presence of dogs at all in public lands, or just having thoughts about dogs and wildlife. And
Yeah.
here in Philadelphia, we have many
Thoughts.
dog owners, more than deer out. So
Yeah.
We have 2 great questions. One is, do we have any data on are people eating the elk that they are hunting? Survey data. And the other is the impact of dogs or regulations on dogs in the state game lands.
Yeah. So for the elk, I don't know that info right off the top of my head as far as specific numbers, but most hunters, ethical, responsible hunters, shoot what they harvest and eat what they harvest. So I will not go hunting for anything if I don't plan on eating that animal. And I think that sentiment is shared with a lot of hunters. So, my also personal opinion, elk is one of the best meats out there, best tasting meats. So that's like a delicacy for people.
What does elk taste like?
It's just like beef to me. But like
Really good beef?
really good beef because they eat grass. So where deer are kind of browsers and they'll eat twigs and branches and leaves
All
and
our
everything.
flowers.
Yeah, yep. Elk are mainly just grass eaters. So really, really good. A lot of people, I would say, has to be high 90% of people will eat their meat. But if they don't eat it, say for example, if you have a lot of DMA tags, you harvest 10 deer, and there's no way you can eat all that meat yourself. We do have a really strong partnership with an organization called Hunters Sharing the Harvest. And that is something where you can donate your harvested meat, whether it be venison or elk meat, and it is given to families in need or people that can't afford to get their own food or their own meat. So we're really happy to have that partnership. And we have almost, I think 500,000 hunters or something like that donate to Hunters Sharing the Harvest every year. So really strong partnership with them. And then what was the other question?
Dogs.
Yeah. So again, I'm not a state game warden, so I don't know the specific rules and regulations, but when you're on our game lands. And then also I would advise in the fall season, which is when most of our hunting seasons come into season, it's recommended that they wear something orange. And you dog walkers also wear something orange to make yourself more visible to the hunters, especially if your dogs are like brownish in color
With a
or
white tail.
yeah, brownish in color with white tail, It's sad to say that there have been mistakes in the past with things like that. So again, I'm not a game warden, so I don't know the specific rules, but if you're interested, you go on our website, which is www.pgc.pa.gov. We have our Hunter Digest, and that outlines all of the rules and regulations. And I believe there's a section in there about dogs. So
In the back, yes.
Questions, regarding tracking, are leg hold traps, legal in Pennsylvania?
We have a question on trapping and a specific kind of, just give me 1 second, a specific kind of trap. No, the leg hold trap.
yeah,
And then you have a second question?
The second question is, I used to have a cabin in the English Mountains, and it was a hunting club that was using a salt lick. Are they legal?
ooh, good
And then we
question.
also have a question about the use of salt licks, a certain kind of tractor for deer.
Yeah. So trapping in Pennsylvania, trapping itself in all of the US, but in Pennsylvania as well, is a highly, highly regulated wildlife management tool as well. So leg hold traps, I think, are outlawed across the nation, and we're only allowed to use foothold traps. So foothold traps basically hold the animal by their wrist, and there's several different kinds of traps, several different methods and methodologies, but a lot of them kind of have the part that closes. These are called the jaws, and sometimes traps will have rubber on the edges of the jaws. And that's also a more humane kind of trap. So there are a set of principles called best management practices for trapping. And so for a trap to be legal in Pennsylvania, it has to follow those best management practices, or there, like I said, there's a lot of laws and regulations regarding trapping in Pennsylvania, and that can all be found in our digest as well. And then the other question was about salt licks. So there are certain areas in Pennsylvania. Let me back up a little bit. So an area besides a DMA that is allowed to be hunted is called a Wildlife Management Unit, or WMU. So if I wanted to go hunting in Berks County, that would be WMU 5C. So I would have to get my tag to say 5C. There are some wildlife management units that open up to hunting earlier than other units or later. Some, that is called, when you use a salt lick, that is called baiting. And essentially, this is where Pennsylvania is different than other states too. There is no baiting allowed. There is no hunting over bait allowed. In certain areas, during certain times of the year, there are different rules that sometimes, like a day or two or things like that. Again, not a game warden, so I don't know the specifics, but generally, you're not allowed to hunt over bait. In other states, it's a very common practice. Thinking about Texas specifically, Texas is a huge, huge state, but they're 94% private land in Texas. And there are places in Texas where you'll have a feeder with corn and, a deer 20 yards from you eating that corn. So a lot of people think about, when you think about the ethics of hunting, it kind of takes away that wild or that chase of the game aspect if you're luring them in with a food source, and that's kind of why in Pennsylvania baiting isn't allowed. You can get a citation for baiting or hunting over bait. People commonly use salt licks, apples, corn, things like that, because those are really tasty for deer, elk, bears. But like I said, that also goes along with never feeding wildlife. We want to help keep wildlife wild, and giving them unnatural foods or foods that their bodies may not be used to can make them sick. It can make them lose their wild nature, make them more friendly, more willing to come up with people, which is also not good. So yeah, salt licks and baiting is not allowed in the majority of our state.
I have a great question from our folks on Zoom. Is there any consideration being given to the reintroduction of large predators, such as mountain lions, yikes, or wolves, as a means of controlling overpopulation of deer?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and something that has been thought of and experimented with out west. So if any of you are familiar, I think Montana and Colorado are big states that are dealing with wolves and wolf introduction. So historically, both wolves and mountain lions lived in Pennsylvania. And back in the 1800s, before the Game Commission was founded, they were hunted to extinction because they kept eating our livestock that the people were we're trying to raise. So both wolves and mountain lions have been extirpated. There are a few people in Pennsylvania who still believe that we have mountain lions, and I am not one to never say never. But with the amount of people that we have in Pennsylvania, the amount of roads we have in Pennsylvania, and the amount of trail cameras that Pennsylvanians have out in the woods, we would definitely have some sort of proof at this point if mountain lions lived here. So I think when we were talking about carrying capacity before, I was talking about biological carrying capacity. So how much could the ecosystem sustain? But there's also a kind of facet called social carrying capacity. And that is how many of one animal are we humans capable and comfortable living with? So bears are a great example of that. So Pennsylvania is rich for bears. We have a lot of bears in Pennsylvania, about 10,000, but our ecosystems could probably support closer to 18 or 20,000 bears. The reason why we have a bear hunting season also to help keep those numbers in check is because of that social carrying capacity. Some people love bears, but also they are a charismatic megafauna that some people just don't jive with. And human bear interactions can be pretty scary, and unfortunately sometimes can be fatal.
We had a very exciting day here in the Wissahickon almost 10 years ago when we had a bear visit us.
Yeah.
And
bears can cause a big stir. So where our ecosystems can support about 20,000 bears, historically we try to keep it within around 10,000, and I would say that would be the same kind of reasoning as to why.
I don't think I'm prepared for 10,000 mountain lions.
Right. That's the same kind of reasoning I would imagine between or behind mountain lions and wolves. Not to say that we would never ever consider that, but we as the Game Commission, we are public servants. So we are the trust managers, where wildlife being the trust, and we serve the public as much as we serve the wildlife. So I imagine if anything came out about us trying to introduce mountain lions or wolves, we would have a huge
range.
Yeah, and mountain lions too, right?
Yeah.
Mountain lions do have a really large range. So then that comes into play of communicating with other states and how other states around us manage their wildlife. So it would just be a really large.
I thought I saw a mountain lion once.
Yeah.
It was a bobcat, and I Googled and I was like, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't see a mountain lion.
Yeah,
that was scary enough.
A lot of the pictures that we get sent into us, like, oh my gosh, it's a mountain lion. It's most likely either a bobcat or a house cat. So
this was a bobcat.
Yeah.
I know what a house cat is. All right. Any other questions?
One question about the elk. How many are at that location you said?
Yeah, it varies. So the total herd is about 1,800. But Benazet is kind of right smack in the middle of that range of elk, the radius. So it just depends on what time of day you're there, what time of year you're there. But I would say probably 200-ish elk at any given time. Up there, one of our partners is called Kika, the Keystone Elk Country Alliance, and they have a really beautiful visitor center up there with some food plots planted. So in this time of year, the rut, when the elk are really moving around, it's quite possible in the early morning or early night to see anywhere from 50 to 100 elk in Kika's backyard, right there at the visitor center. So it's very, very cool.
I'm already want to rent a bus and have a member trip.
Yeah.
You mentioned about coyotes, but I wanted to ask about feeding wildlife, because we have our groundhog who insists on eating my bird food.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go near him. I want him to do what he does and go. I
Right.
He's special, but he loves it. He sits there and eats for hours.
Right.
He goes away and sits.
Right.
He's full.
So that's a really good question. So bird feeders, I've been saying don't feed wildlife, but then we have bird feeders. So bird feeders are kind of that gray area. Most times we operate black and white, but bird feeders are definitely a gray area because we recognize the value that it brings days, see how it goes, and then put it back out. Another idea too is birds mostly need food from secondary sources like a bird feeder in the winter, when all of their natural food like insects or berries are, not in the season. So from like spring until early to mid fall, you don't really need a bird feeder out. They've got plenty of food out there. But the winter is when bird seed is most needed. Groundhogs too, another reason why other animals come to eat bird seed. I like to think about it with spending energy, right? So if I'm a groundhog and I have to be scurrying around day in and day out and searching for my food and chasing down, or you have this basically a Burger King on a stick. I can just go to that Burger King, get my food, and go home happy. And I can keep going back to Burger King instead of having to spend all this energy running around. So it's the same thing with the groundhog, same thing with the bears. So yeah, just keep in mind that if it keeps happening over and over, maybe think about removing that bird feeder for a week or two and then trying to put it back out. But
It's just I want to know.
yeah.
Well, you got
Yeah.
some decisions to make here.
Yeah. Groundhogs, I believe, are a true hibernator, so you might not see them much in the winter here coming up. Yeah,
Unless somebody eats them.
yeah. Oh, and hopefully the grass will be coming back, so he'll like the grass.
I mean, like an animal, not me.
Yeah, coyotes eat groundhogs. Yep, we have coyotes in Philadelphia.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jordan. Are there any
Yeah.
other questions? Otherwise, we're gonna, I'll encourage, if you have individual questions that weren't answered and you want to talk to Jordan a little bit, let's let her get, maybe some cheese and crackers and a beverage and
Yeah.
stick around a little bit. This was
Oh,
really
thank you.
excellent.
Thank you.
Very exciting to, again, hear about the game lands in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
to hear about the visitor center with the history exhibition.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
elk.
yeah.
I'm really excited
Everybody
about
loves
elk.
elk.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.